Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from Yarkspiri fantasyart.com. Today I'm continuing with the anatomy study that I did last week. I'm doing the muscle anatomy for the skull on the side view. In this case, I am doing it traditional. I just wanted to show you guys the two methods, both traditional and digital mediums. They're both very similar. I use pretty much the exact same techniques as I did for the digital study that you saw in a previous video. I do have a pegboard attached to my light table, so this allows me to use animation paper and flip between a previous drawing, which is what you're seeing me do quite often, especially in this case here. The reason why I flip and I just don't turn on the light table is that it prevents me from drawing too dark and not being able to erase my lines afterwards. So by flipping only, I'm using the bottom drawing as a guide without having to rely on it. It's also a lot easier on the eyes, because if you're using a light table for a long period of time, it is really bad for your eyes. You will have migraines. So to prevent that, what I do is I do flip quite often. Even when I'm doing the cleanup for this drawing here, for the actual muscles, I do flip and draw. I do try to avoid just using the light table. Also, when you're using the light table too, not all the detail shows up, so you can't see everything that's underneath. And because of that, it is important to, well, like I said, flip. Once again, I'm rolling the sheets between my fingers, so I have one sheet in between each finger, depending on how many sheets I have. It does take a while to get used to, but once you get used to it, it really does save you a lot of time. It makes it a lot easier in general, and it makes it a lot more interesting as well. Now, for this portion here, what you see me doing is I'm actually working out the rough structure of the head or of the muscles underneath, and this is a first layer. It is important for me to understand what type of muscles are underneath the surface muscles, in this case especially, because it is a skull study. Because they will affect the muscles that are overlapping on top. Those muscles will wrap around slightly and deform according to how those muscles are. So this is the second layer. This is going to be the surface muscles. And as you can see, once again, I do tend to draw very clean. It's just a habit that I have. A lot of my friends don't draw clean. It's just personal preference. I tend to enjoy doing cleanup, which is probably why I draw a lot cleaner than some people. And as you can see, I'm constantly flipping between my two drawings that I have, both the skull and the anatomy underneath that. I'm not relying on my light table in this case because I'm doing the rough. If you do rely too much on the light table, what tends to happen too is your drawings just stiffen up. They lose that life to them that you have or that you're trying to convey. So once again, it is important to try and flip and draw if you can, if you know how. Now, although I'm drawing the surface muscles, there is certain areas of the skull where you will see the bone. So for that, I have to check my reference and make sure that I know which areas those are, because when I start actually doing the muscle anatomy, I'm not going to be coloring those in with my kohl race. Now, for the entire drawing, I'm using kohl race pencils. You can use Laurentian pencils. The big advantage to the kohl race, though, is that you can erase these pencils. As long as you don't draw it too hard, you won't have any issues erasing it afterwards. And that makes it a lot easier when you're doing rough drafts and you're constantly reworking the structure of a drawing. These are very useful. Also, when you're doing cleanup, you can also get something called a non-photo blue pencil. This pencil does not show up on the scanner, or shows up very little, depends on how hard you press. The only disadvantage to the non-photo blue is I do find it has a waxy surface to it. So if you're using a graphite pencil on top of it, it's going to be a bit slippery. So you do have to make sure you choose a graphite pencil that can draw on top of that quite easily, and that properly shows your line weight. It's a very useful pencil. I've used it a lot in the past. I use it a lot less now, simply because I tend to draw a lot cleaner than for the pieces that I'm working on. If I was doing actual animation, which I don't do very often anymore, then I would definitely be using a non-photo blue for the cleanup process. Now, I am using 3 colors. The first color that I'm starting off with the coal race, is actually an orange. It's very bright orange, actually, which is why I'm not using it too much. I don't have the actual name of it, unfortunately. The main coal race that I'm using, though, is the cadmium red, and that one's really good for actually doing the muscle strands, and which is why I use this one mainly. But once I'm done with the main color, I'll go in and only in certain areas will I darken it with the Tuscan red. Now you can get all these normally at any art store. Any good one would have these products. You could, like I said, use Laurentian pencils, the cheapest ones you could find. I find actually the cheaper pencils tend to work better if you're going to do something something similar to this. Now the key thing, though, is to keep your pencil as pointy as possible. There's a couple ways of doing that. Well, first of all, you can sharpen it, but as you're using it, you can slowly roll the pencil between your fingers, and that way you're alternating the point. By doing that, you don't have to sharpen it as much. You do hold a finer tip for a much longer period of time, and I am using that technique when I'm doing this, just so that I don't have to constantly keep sharpening my pencil. I also have found that the traditional old school cranking pencil sharpeners tend to work the best to get a nice point. First of all, they don't require batteries, and these things last they pretty much last your lifetime. As long as you buy one, you're good. And as long as it's a good one, even better. You won't ever have to buy a new one. I actually tend to use that one, which is why I sharpen my pencil off screen, is because I have to move around the camera and actually sharpen it on my desk. But yeah, no, I've had mine for about 3-4 years now. I haven't had a single problem with it. You never have to fix it. You never have to put batteries in it. It's always there. And it's I find I get a better point from it. And I tend to waste a lot, excuse me. I tend to waste a lot less of my pencil when I'm using the good old-fashioned cranking pencil sharpener. So, yeah, I do recommend that. You're going to save a lot of money if you get one of those. Because I'll be quite honest, I personally find that the mechanical ones tend to be a waste of money in the long run, because you're using up more pencil than you need to, and you're wasting a lot of money on batteries. Unless it's plugging into a socket, there's no reason to use one of those. You can definitely get away with just one of those old-fashioned ones. Now, as you see, it's kind of hard to see considering the distance of the camera. However, as I'm drawing this in, there's individual strands similar to when I was drawing this digitally. Because I have a pointed pencil, I can achieve that, and I'm doing it slowly so that I can keep those strands. You do not, when you're doing an anatomy study, a proper anatomy study, you do want to show the muscle strands, because this further shows structure. Because in an actual muscle, you do have strands of fibers, and these are visible. If you've ever seen any dissections, or anybody has done any dissections, like on frogs or anything, or on rat. I know I did so in my biology class. You will notice that there is muscle strands in the muscles. And because of this, you do want to show those. I also, you also notice, because I do have the light table currently on, but because I have the light table, I can't see what the final look is. And because of that, I actually have to just slightly lift my page up. By doing that, I can see, okay, I have enough detail in this area, or I need to add more detail. Because it's kind of hard to judge when you have a light table on, because the color does get diffused, because, well, you have light shining through it. So that's definitely a technique I do constantly use when I'm doing an anatomy study. I'm constantly lifting up my page. Also, I'm not actually flipping my page at this point. The problem with flipping your page on a clean drawing is that you tend to add crinkles into the image itself, and you do want to avoid that. Now, in the final image, there's going to be some crinkles around the nose, the top of the bridge of the nose, and that's because I did flip. It's a habit of mine, because I'm so used to flipping my page. But because of that, I did get some little crinkles in the nose area. It's hard to tell in the final image, but they are there, so it's something to be aware of when you're drawing like this. As I'm working on this too, I'm constantly looking at my reference. I'm using 3 different reference books during this drawing. The main one that I was using, though, was the plated prints. If you want the title for that, it's in my previous videos. I believe it's actually in the last video that I posted right before this one. I give you a couple of references that I typically use when I'm doing anatomy studies. Generally speaking, the better your reference is, the more potential you have for a good drawing. It's simple as that. I do try to keep my reference books. I have a lot of them, but I'm very picky about them. Never buy a reference book that is not as accurate as you can get it. There's only a couple out there that are actually really good. You'll see a lot of reference books that are amateurish. And the drawing quality is very low. I don't recommend those. I do recommend that you spend a little bit more money and get a better quality book than go to a bookstore and say, oh, okay, that's a pretty cool drawing, but is it accurate? You need to compare that to other books and see which one is the most accurate book for what you're doing. Because you can easily spend hundreds of dollars on books and none of them can be accurate, and that will affect your drawings. Because if you're doing an anatomy study, you want to be as accurate as you can. If you're not, then you're not going to be producing drawings that are as, well, correct anatomically. And there's a lot of books out there, a lot of reference books. They are not correct. They have the general idea of the muscle. However, they lack the finesse of it, and they're really good if you just need a basic knowledge of the anatomy. But if you really want to understand anatomy, you definitely need to get one that's going to provide you with as much accuracy as possible. Now, here's the final image. I did use my graphite pencil to fine-tune some areas, and I did have to up the contrast after scanning it. That's something you normally have to do, and I just used the levels in Photoshop to do that. But other than that, that's the actual image that I drew, and I didn't have to add any more details digitally after. So that is what you're looking for as a final product if you do it properly. So thank you for watching, and take care.